Okay, so we're going to begin going through the process of taking one of these cards off the table and talking about how you're going to work your way through that. So step one, there's 3 steps in the process. Step one is own it. The simple way of saying what you've got to do to own it is it means you've got to take responsibility for your share of putting that card on the table. Now when somebody's coming to me as a couple, rarely is the couple in a situation where one's innocent completely and one's guilty. Usually they both have a share in it, and so your challenge as a couple is to own your share. Now, as we go through this 3-step process, let me just tell you right off the bat that there's one thing that's going to foil this process. If anything at all causes this process to get aborted, you can be doing well in step 1, well in step 2, and it can all fall apart in step 3. Some people aren't even going to get through step 1, and if there's a simple reason why you're going to get hung up getting through this process, it's pride. Now there's many variations on pride, but if there's one thing that's going to cause you to either get defensive or bow up or resist or fight back or withdraw, anything like that, you can just put your money on it, it's pride. Now let's go through what this means about owning it. This is the talking stage of the resolution. We'll get into what goes beyond the talking, but you've got to at least start by talking. If there's going to be effective communication now in the resolution of this conflict, 2 things have to be present between the 2 of you when you go through this conflict, and that is, you've got to know that it's safe, and you've got to know that you're going to be understood. If either safety or understanding are not present, then you're not going to take the risk of jumping into this conflict. Now, it can become unsafe one of 2 different ways. It can become unsafe because one of you goes passive, meaning you either are not even willing to engage in the conversation, or if the conversation starts and begins to escalate, then you're going to abdicate and you'll withdraw and leave the room. Or you can make it unsafe by becoming aggressive, and so you can start verbally punching back. It can even escalate and become physical. Okay? So if one or either parties in this relationship feels like it's going to be unsafe, either passively or aggressively, then we're not going to have a conversation. We're not going to start to be able to talk about it. On the understanding part, same thing. I've got to know that if I start talking, you're going to listen. So really on this owning part, the harder part of this, I think, is not so much the talking, it's the listening. Because when somebody starts to come at you and begins to explain to you your share, we don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that. And so again, we're going to be tempted to either pull back or start to defend. Now this is where the cross becomes so helpful to us. Okay? So I'm going to go back to the Philippians 2 passage that we just talked about in the previous section and say that you're going to have to learn to do just exactly what Christ did, which is, what do we find Jesus doing? Right before he actually goes to the cross himself, what does he do? We find him in the garden. Okay? And in the garden, he ends up, now he took a couple disciples with him, but they fell asleep. He's in the garden alone, and what is he doing? He's praying. Now, you and I are going to have to learn to do that as well. So nobody likes conflict. So when we start to do this, if the conversation begins to escalate, we're going to try to do what Jesus did. It's entirely appropriate to say, time out. It's starting to get unsafe, or you're starting to not understand what I'm saying to you. So you call a timeout, and during that timeout is not about counting to 3 and cooling your jets. It's not about going for a walk around the block 3 times and then just getting yourself emotionally settled. That's not what you're doing. Okay? Now you might go ahead and do that, but what you've got to do in addition to that is you've got to pray. You've got to take yourself back to the cross, because what you're looking for is you're looking for resources. In other words, you're looking for grace in your heart. You're trying to become rich in grace in your heart so that you can actually deal with the indebtedness that's being discussed. So you go back, you humble yourself, and you ask God to kindly give you grace to be able to have this conversation. Now the best way to do this, I'm going to use a verse out of Proverbs 20, it's verse 5, and it says that the heart of a man is a deep well, and a man of understanding draws it out. Now you don't draw somebody's heart out by making statements. That comes off as rather arrogant. The way you come at somebody for understanding is you come at them with questions, not statements. So if the heart of a man is a deep well and a man of understanding draws it out, back in the day, wells were labor intensive. You just didn't turn a faucet or mash a button. You had to crank. In other words, you had to work at this. Okay? And sometimes your spouse, your children, your coworkers, they're going to make you work at this. You start asking questions, and we don't know where this is going to go. But if you keep yourself humble and keep asking questions, honey, tell me more. What did I do? How did that hurt? I don't understand. Okay? You start teasing that out, and you're going to get a lot of helpful information. But you've got to be humble enough to actually hear it. So if you call the timeout, you go back to your room. This is what I typically do. I'll go to my bedroom, I'll go to the kitchen, I'll go to the office, I'll go someplace where I can get myself alone and then work myself through and start saying, where is my heart upset now in this thing? Am I holding on to a desire that has me so emotionally wound up, I'm not interested in listening? Okay? I don't want to hear it. So you get out there and you start to humble yourself that way, get yourself back to the cross, and then you set a time. You say, you know what, let's mutually agree, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. But it seems to me that we want to live, because we want to live debt-free, you want to resolve every day's debts that day. So the Bible would say, back in Ephesians, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. If that means we have to stay up late at night to work through this thing, we're going to do that. Now sometimes my wife and I, we've actually gotten into a conflict and it's gotten late enough and we're so tired, we'll mutually agree to say, okay, you know what, we're going to stop, get a good night's sleep, and tomorrow morning when we get up and go for our walk, we're going to talk about it when we're on our walk. Okay, but as long as you mutually agree, what you can't do is let this thing hang unresolved and say, I'm just going to leave and go to the office. Well, if you go to the office and you never come back, or you go to the office and you come back and you never pick it back up again, that's not going to help you own it. So there's work to do here, and it means going back to the cross again. So if you come back together and you start working on it and it begins to escalate again, or somebody wants to abdicate again, then you call the timeout again. You do that several times. Now, if after several times you're still not experiencing any breakthrough, then I'm going to recommend what Scripture says to do, and that is get somebody outside of your relationship to help you. So I'm using that Philippians 2 passage as the model, but when we go to Philippians 1:27 or Philippians 4, what we find there is that the church at Philippi, there were people, and evidently 2 ladies in particular, because they're named in chapter 4, that didn't get along too well with each other. Okay? And Paul's saying, listen, I'm sending somebody to help you to make sure you get this conflict worked through. Or in Philippians 1:27, he says, strive together for the faith of the gospel. So it's not unusual that you can't always resolve all your conflicts alone. You've got to be humbled enough to recognize that you might actually have to have some outside help to mediate and work your way through it. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Now again, sometimes pride doesn't want to go there. So people say, well, I'm just a private person. And I want to say, well, what's the Bible word for being a private person? It just means you're being proud. So go ahead and enlist your small group leader, your pastor, a friend, somebody that can help you work your way through. Now, having said all of that, just talking about it isn't enough. Some couples don't talk well at all together. Some couples, that's all they want to do, and you'll talk it to death. But talking by itself is not enough. We're going to have to take the talking now and move on to the next step.